Hey, everyone. Welcome to Milestones Motivation and Money. I am Angel Radcliffe, and today we have Melissa Llarena. How are you?
Hello, Angel.
All the way from Australia, I should say.
Yeah, Sydney in the house here.
I know. I've never been to Australia, and I just find it so fascinating, the time zones. And not only that, but I have a huge following in Australia for some odd reason. Place I've never visited. But Melissa, you were a guest on season 1 of the podcast, and we talked about living a fulfilled life. You won a podcast award for the best story of resilience. So the audience really enjoyed everything that you had to say. And today we're going to talk about the courage of imagination. But before we get into that, how about you let everyone know more about you? Reintroduce yourself.
Absolutely, Angel. I was just thinking because you have Milestones, Motivation, and Money, MMM. I'm so happy. My name is Melissa. So it's kind of like the alliteration here is just mind boggling, right? All these M's. So here's where I'm going. As far as my background, so I've had my business for about 10 years now. And so I started out as a career strategist. And my focus was partnering with these like super successful, very ambitious executives, a lot of marketing executives specifically, who tend to have a really big imagination. However, they're bogged down by PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets. So they don't really have as much of an opportunity to use them, except at the most senior levels. So I have found. And so for 10 years, working with these executives in Cubicle Nation, I've learned quite a bit. And that's what brings me to today, which is this need for people to leverage almost like the childlike quality of imagination that they may have felt has been lost or that has abandoned them. And so that's like my big mission. My mission is to really resolve this like deficit as I see it in the world of life. So I know that a lot of people, the pandemic, 2020, even now, continues to be this, undefined, a lot of uncertainty ahead of you moment in our lives. And people are really trying to think through, how can I design the next chapter of my life in a way that's intentional, in a way that's going to feel more aligned with like the real me, and in a way that really takes advantage of like these new opportunities that did not exist the last time that, I was thinking about my future, which may have been like as a, freshman in college, right? When people were picking their major. So that's what brings me here today. And that has been part of my journey as a podcaster myself. And so on my podcast, having spoken to about 100 different people who have been absolutely creative with their career, super curious with the way that they've approached their life, and courageous by taking bold leaps and big steps, I learned from them, right? Angel, you're a podcast host. Like, how can you not learn from all these conversations that we have, right? So that's where I am today. I mean, I am all about really reinstating this like inner child that we have, and inner child from a perspective of, we had these like childlike qualities that ultimately we no longer use, or we might feel, insecure in using. Things like, that like instinct to just like take action, just do something, not even see if we could actually like swim in a pool, but just jump in. Or this enormous sense of self-belief. It's like, I mean, we believe in Santa Claus, right? Like if we're kids, if we're really thinking along that line. So the other idea is having the energy of a child. So if we have these ambitious dreams, how are we going to do it in a way that we don't need to keep pressing snooze, and just like wake up out of bed and just be able to execute? So that's another piece of the puzzle of how I support people. And this insane amount of curiosity. Every single executive, every single one of your bosses is super curious, whether they're curious about whether you're actually doing your work at home or curious about the next trends or innovation. People are curious at the most senior levels. And so all of this to say, applying these childlike qualities, including the one of being an explorer as well, they've added so much value to super, super senior people and to the people that I've interviewed in my podcast that now I want to teach that philosophy. I want to help people really thoughtfully design the next chapter of their life. And I want everyone to think about this more like a child, because a lot of us have done this thinking like an adult. And if it ain't working, if we don't like what we experienced, rather than replicate, let's think about this very, very differently. So that's what really excites me right now, Angel.
And you made some very good points in discussing your background and your story. And, even in this world of podcasting and having a chance to network and interview other people, we as hosts are continuously learning and we're learning from our guests. So in our mind, we're like, hey, we're bringing people on to really pour into our audience. But at the same time, we don't know everything. Everyone has some definite skill set that we all would like to have or we want to know more about. So we're like, light bulb moment. So I've had a few of those, and I'm so glad that I've started this podcast, but happy that you have yours as well, and you're able to really feed off of some of those other people. So Melissa, your career journey, the story was absolutely amazing. The story that you shared on the podcast. I know today we're talking about more about imagination. And when I think about imagination, that can be a very prosperous topic or it can be a bit ominous, depending on if you're optimistic or if you're a pessimist. So, what really would you describe is like what it takes to be in a creative mindset and have that imagination?
I love those thoughts because I think when you go back to the philosophy, it's really a matter of breaking it down. Like, how would a child think about that topic? Like, do you really see a lot of negative, down, just sad, like, oh my God, it's never going to happen kind of kids? No, you tend to see kids that are super optimistic, overly optimistic at times, super excited, jumping up and down, cannot contain themselves. And so really applying that way of thought, as far as like thinking about anything that we approach in life, any novel experience or any experience that we've already experienced before, but approaching it with like a new lens, a new perspective, and thinking about it more with excitement and curiosity is one way to start your journey as far as really, considering all that is available. And as I'm writing a book on that very topic, really, designing your next chapter by using these childlike qualities that you may have felt you no longer have or can have. As I write that book, really what it's been for me is imagination. And it almost does seem a bit biblical, but this is what I've landed on. It really is all that is seen and all that is unseen. That's how I've expressed it in my book. And the reason I say that is because in our mind, we see things that are reality based and some things that can be pure fantasies that are hard to replicate. But then if you think about the icons, the people that you admire most, like just think about Steve Jobs or think about Elon Musk or think about Sarah Blakely, like, these things felt like impossibilities or had never been done before. However, just like a child, they believed in themselves. And that's an interesting point that I want to just bring up, because this idea of whether something is, scary or exciting, this idea of being more imaginative in our lives, I think a lot of it has to do with self-trust, right? So not only being able to have those visions in our mind, but then also knowing that we can count on ourselves. And I think that's totally different because I think that's a position of power because that's within your locus of control. If you now start thinking to yourself, okay, I don't trust other people, well, then you're relinquishing your own power. And so that's a harder thing to really think through. The most important piece is first, trust yourself. I have this big idea as an example. I want my life to look this way. I'll give you like a very specific example. I want to be able to go to a lake and be on a kayak at 6 a.m. every single morning before I go to work. That's a very simple idea on the surface. And it's just a matter of saying to yourself, well, A, do I have a kayak? B, let me go buy a kayak. C, let me go and tell my partner, as an example, that I intend to be on a kayak in the middle of a lake at 6:30 a.m. Can you hang out with the kids at that one time? And so it's also a matter of, not just believing that you can have that life experience, but then also knowing you can count on yourself to be able to make it practical, like really execute on the idea. And then also make sure that you tell someone if you're a parent. And that's kind of how I think about this because I have 3 little kids, so that all your excuses are like out the door. Like you don't have any more excuses. Like now you've made it known, you've figured out what you need to do so that this way you could still be that responsible adult. But ultimately, you're out on a lake, and chances are, when you go to the office or when you go to your home office, you're going to look at any business challenge or any challenge in your life with a completely different set of eyes. Maybe a set of eyes with like greater gratitude for your life because you just got to hang out on a lake, or with just a different perspective. It's really interesting if you look at some of the inventions that exist right now, like little devices. So I've noticed some of them come from the things you see in nature, like the way a bird like pecks on a, whatever tree trunk or whatever. That might be an actual like construction machine that you see, and the way that it operates. It's really quite interesting if you observe around you where people have gotten their inspiration. And some of that does require you to get into a place where you have that stillness so that you can actually listen to your own thoughts, i.e., that spot on a lake is sounding pretty good to me right now.
Right. And, it really ties into like the self reflection piece. I always say self reflection is key when you're wanting to grow, whether if it's in your personal life, in your business, whatever you're trying to do and whatever goals you're trying to achieve, you have to look at the path you took previously and think about like why that path didn't work. And it takes you to this process of like rediscovery and like rediscovering like who you are. But Melissa, so many people will say, I can dream all day. How do I actually take action, or how do I actually build up the courage to take action? So we're talking about the courage of imagination. What about the people who, they are the dreamers, they just need a little push? What suggestions can you give to them?
Yeah, so it's really about, again, thinking about anything through the eyes of a child, right? And so I have a very defined process how to do this. But I would say the first part of it is really having that amount of self trust that you need, that not only will you execute on that thing, but even if you fall and you're completely humiliated, embarrassed, you're going to get back up. Right. So it is resilience, which is something that we spoke to on your podcast, Angel. So it is an important piece of the puzzle, and listeners might want to like listen to that episode for that sort of guidance. But as it relates to having the courage to do anything in life, whether it's something that is practical or something that is a bit more fantasy based, I think what's really important is that, we each have a choice, and the choice is quite simple. Either I say I'm going to do it and I actually do it, or I say I'm going to do it and I let myself down, and letting myself down counts. Here's the thing, and it's part of my writing journey with my book. There are so many subtleties with regards to the way that we accept disappointments in our lives. And so, a lot of us, and I see this in corporate for sure, and I see this even as a mom to children, a lot of us have this like, priority, right? There's this hierarchy. It's like, well, if I disappoint my boss, then, I might get fired, I might not get paid, I might get whatever. And that's like a bad thing. And so, we will do anything. I mean, we'll do like triple somersaults to not disappoint our boss. More fear based because we don't want to get fired. And that's totally fair. Now, what about I'm not telling anybody that I want to do this goal? And so no one's going to really know if I don't do this goal. And maybe no one's going to be like truly affected if I do this goal. So if I disappoint myself, and it's only myself, that is okay. And that is actually not okay. And that's actually part of the whole building self trust journey. Because once you start showing up for yourself, especially behind closed doors when no one else knows whether you're showing up for yourself, that is when you realize that, holy mother of guacamole, I'm able to really change my life. It's like, for me, as an example, I remember around the age of 40, when I turned 40, I said, you know what? I've been doing a really nice talking the game thing, saying that I want to look buff, and for me, like, my expectations are like, not that being a mom, like, oh, you look good for a mom. Like, I didn't want to hear that. No, I wanted to look good for a woman. Okay. Like, don't like caveat this. So for me, I said to myself, maybe I didn't actually say like self, but I thought to myself, I said, okay, well, I'm here. I'm in Sydney. It's warm and beautiful. And so most of the year, I'll be wearing like shorts and stuff. So if there's any place on this planet to try to look good, it's here. So I went to the gym. I signed up. But here's the difference. Not only did I sign up, but then during this whole lockdown, this whole homeschooling, when I couldn't even go to the gym, when no one around me expected me to actually like execute on like the exercise piece of it, I would basically just go on YouTube, find the video that I need, do the exercise. And if I was being looked at by my kids and my husband, so be it. So I didn't miss one step. Okay, not one step. And for me, an excuse, unacceptable. That's my standard. I cannot disappoint myself, right? And so that's a distinction. And that's the beginning part of courage, which sounds kind of like a roundabout, but let me explain. Once you start believing that you can handle something, that you're going to show up, you're also going to interpret that as, well, even if I fail, even if I'm embarrassed, even if, someone says something bad about me, I will still, and I can still stand up. I'm strong enough. I'm powerful enough. And so I think that's a piece of the puzzle, because this whole thing of like saying you want something and then your behavior just looking completely differently, it's really just disappointments, and it's you not being able to trust yourself. And that's a very tough spot to be in.
Oh, absolutely. And, as you were speaking, I was sitting here and I was like, okay, can we really compare this to affirmations? Is there really a difference between being imaginative and affirming your goals or affirming those things that you want?
Is there a difference between the two, you're saying?
Do you feel as though there's a difference? Do you feel as though it's the same? So when someone's working on their goals and their affirmations, do you feel like that's being imaginative, or that's having that imagination?
Yeah. So here's the thing, imagination, all of your imagination can stay in your head. So that's one thing. It's not necessarily something that you're then doing something with that to then call it imaginative. Let me explain. Essentially, it's the difference between imagination and creativity, right? So imagination is everything, the universe of possibilities that has been seen and unseen. Creativity is now you picking from that universe in your head and basically making into some sort of physical form, or it could be like auditory or whatever, but using your senses to then create it or bring it out into the world. And so that can be the creativity part of it, creating from the reservoir of your entire imagination. So now if you go to affirmations, that's the language that you're using to talk to yourself. Now, here's the big difference. So it's really about making sure that if you're affirming something, you are then behaving in alignment with what you're telling yourself. Otherwise, you're just kind of lying to yourself and you're disappointing to yourself. And then we're back to square one, which I had said is just not a good place to be. So you've got to earn that trust with yourself. So if I were to say, I am, I'm a saver. I'm making this up. I'm a saver, like I make, making it up, $10,000 a month, and I save $5,000 a month. And I am a saver. And I just keep saying those three sentences: what I make, what I save, and who I am, my identity. That's fantastic. However, if then you're going to act in a way that's not in alignment with what you've just affirmed, then that's when you start feeling a little cognitive dissonance, which is when behavior and thought kind of don't align. There's like going in opposite direction. And again, you're not able to trust that you really are a saver because your bank account is showing otherwise. So you want to just be sure that from an imaginative perspective, you can imagine as huge as you'd like and be really in a fantasy world. However, if you're not then taking from that big, vast reservoir and creating something that you intend to put your energy and thoughts around, then you are a talker. Maybe, if that, because maybe you're not even telling anyone. And that's another equation in our head. A lot of times, what we're doing is we're sparing our ego. So I have this book I'm writing, and I have been writing this book for maybe like 3-4 months now. Have 150,000 words or more at this point. However, not until I'm able to show, let's say, a chapter or 2 chapters to someone beyond me, then that's when I will say that's really creating. Even if it was just stuck like a file on my laptop and no one saw it, I don't even know if that really counts. Like that's still kind of like not showing anyone anything. So no one's getting any value from it. And it's also sparing me my ego. Like no one's able to say whether it's good, it's bad, or anything. And then in my head, I could just pretend I'm like this genius, right? And that's great. Sometimes we need to feel like geniuses, but if we want to make an impact, you've got to be humble enough to let someone help you really, flourish as the genius that you would like to become.
I was just sitting here. I was like so zoned in. I was forgetting I'm interviewing you.
Yeah, Angel, this is a conversation like no other. You could ask me anything. I'm here.
So 150,000 words. I was over here calculating because I was like, okay, I know how many words it takes for one page in a book. If we're gonna go something like a 5 by 8, so I was like, okay, how big is this book? Now, is this the book, The Courage of Imagination?
Yeah. So what I've done, and again, this is a little bit of the benefits of being a podcaster, is I've asked some of my guests who are authors, published authors, or PhDs in like creative writing, kind of like, okay, like, is this normal? So like I told them, I'm like, I have like 150,000 words here, and I feel like it's a mess. Like I understand what I'm saying, but it's not linear. Point of the matter. So ultimately, no, it's not going to be that big. The ideal chapter size is like 2,500 words. And then they have these potato chip chapters, they call them, which are even shorter so that people keep wanting to read, AKA potato chips. And ultimately, I'm now in the second draft of the book. And so the book is about having stories that come from my 100 plus podcast guests who have each been very imaginative in their own ways. And it's people that are, both very highly respected, super corporate, but they've been imaginative, which is why this conversation of bringing these childlike qualities, it's not just a conversation for like a mom hanging out with her kids. No, like these ideas come from, the ex-CMO of GE, Beth Comstock, who was a guest on my podcast. How did she come up with eco imagination? It was through doing weird things, exploring things. Or the idea of, leveraging your imagination and being carried away with it, having that feeling of joy personified. That comes from a New York Times best-selling children's book illustrator, David Roberts. These are ideas that you put them in business, and that's when you start making rockets that, take regular people to space. Or you put them in your life, and that's when you actually astound yourself. Because I think right now we are settling for what we need. And I think in kindergarten, and this is part of the book as well, there's this conflict. We were told, like, this is what you need: house, shelter, food, blah, blah, blah. And this is what you want. And the wants is actually something where I feel we feel the most inspired by. And I'm not talking about shoes. I'm talking about wants. For me, as a little girl, I wanted to do arts and craft, for example. Somebody in kindergarten wouldn't say that that's like a need according to the definition, but that was a way to self soothe myself for a very tough early childhood. That was a way for me to feel energized enough so that this way I can be almost like a caretaker for my mom when she was having her episodes as someone with a mental illness. So, a lot of what we might be taking for granted or what we might not see as necessary, including the use of our emotions to create amazing things, I think we need to bring back if we intend to have a different plan going forward, one that makes us feel energized and just like we have a real spirit inside of us. Because I think a lot of us are now feeling a little flat.
I would definitely have to agree with that. So I think, some of the things that you're talking about, and especially when the book comes out, it's going to help a lot of people. And I love the idea that you have of using the stories of your guests, because I've been working on something very similar, of course, from the financial perspective. And, when I was finished with my season one, I was like, wait a minute, maybe there's a larger purpose for this podcast. And you start getting all of these ideas of how you can really not only network, but collaborate with other people. So I love that. And Melissa, for people who would like to keep up with you and like when the book comes out, do you have a date range of when they can expect the book? Or maybe this has piqued someone's interest. What would you tell them to do to stay in touch?
Absolutely. I would say connect with me on Instagram. That's for sure. I'm getting the word out there. So it's at Melissa Llarena. So 2 L's in my last name, 2 S's in my first name, and Angel has it scrolling right there for everyone. So that's one place where you could absolutely follow me on my journey. The other suggestion would be to like tune into my podcast, an interview with Melissa Llarena. What I am doing right now is doing a little bit of like compilations of the different podcast episodes that I've had. And coming up, I'll do one that's featuring that idea of how some of my podcast guests have used their childlike qualities to inspire them and to be incredibly successful. So I'm going to do that. So definitely the podcast. And then anyone that's interested in boosting their courage and being more imaginative right now, like if they have a goal in mind, I do have a completely free playbook. It's called Courage Makerspace Playbook. And you could just grab that on my website. So it's melissallarena.com and then just /courage. And so that playbook, again, is something that is so helpful because I've paired some of my podcast episodes with essentially insights that I've gleaned from them and that I would really, really advise anyone to consider incorporating into their own lives. And I make it practical. So it's 7 days, boost your courage and pursue something that's been on your heart. Like really pursue, make it physical, take it out of your head and create it.
Melissa, you also have a podcast. So talk to us about the podcast and what listeners can expect if they'd like to hear more from you.
So, An Interview with Melissa Llarena is the name of the podcast. It's available on every single platform where you enjoy your favorite podcasts, such as Milestones, Motivation, and Money. And so, I would say that podcast is my treasure trove. It really is. It's all of these mentors that I never had. And so, it's individuals who are iconic. So, for example, Susie Batiste, the inventor of Poopery, authors of children's books, and then also individuals who are multimillionaires like Gary Vaynerchuk, James Altucher, David Meltzer, James Beard awarded recipients as well. So we've got a little foodie in me that I've expressed by way of these interviews. It's weekly. There's new episodes every single Tuesday. And my ambition is really to have a deep conversation with people about their humanity. So humanity from a perspective of, why is it that they've been so courageous? How have they been able to follow their own curiosities? And how are they approaching their life with more imagination and creativity? And I think that's what's missing because a lot of what you see in terms of media and all of that, it's really missing realness. There's no, there's nothing that you're going to get from me that you're not going to expect from a real New Yorker, essentially. That's randomly based in Sydney. So those are the conversations you can expect. Interview weekly with amazing people you can learn from.
Awesome. And so, we've enjoyed the conversation. It's been short, but it's been so informative, really learning more about courage, resilience, imagination, and I definitely want to go back to the original episode that you were on. So if anyone would like to take a listen to that amazing, amazing episode, it is Living a Fulfilled Life with Melissa Llarena. It's on the season one of Milestones, Motivation, and Money. Again, the podcast is available on all podcasting platforms. Check it out. Follow Melissa online. Keep up with what she's doing and when her book is coming out. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and you know what? We definitely want to have you back, maybe for a panel discussion. So I have some great guests who really like to discuss resilience and motivation. I think it would make a really good show. So we have to talk about some more collaborations down the road, and so appreciate you taking the time to be here all the way from Australia. So love it, love it. So anything else you'd like to share before we close out?
I mean, this is always amazing to really just re-engage with fellow podcasters. I would say that we are definitely a special tribe. And for anyone that's listening, just a random idea. If you randomly on your heart want to start your own podcast, I would say like go for it, because you get to have incredible conversations with someone like Angel. So it's worth it. And I definitely appreciate it. And I mean, the other thing I would say is just ask yourself before making your next decision, really take a step back and just say, how would a child think about this?
Thank you. And I definitely want to just pull out two takeaways that I noted over here. There's a difference between affirmations and imagination. And if you're just tuning in right now, you got to go back and rewatch and get those nuggets. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Have an awesome one, Angel. Happy holidays.